Hey, yo, what's up, YouTube, man? It's your boy, Action Jackson, man. In today's video, I'm going to be bringing you guys my reaction and how my feelings of how the season went for the Dallas Cowboys in the 2022-2023 season. So before we hop into the video, I'd appreciate if you guys would like the video, subscribe if you are new, comment, and share my video with anyone who you think might enjoy my content, man. So hopping straight into it, man, I'm gonna go over, so the breakdown of this video is I'm gonna go over the offseason first and how that went, how the season went, and also how the season ended, my reactions and what I was thinking through after each game, things of that nature during the season, and what I thought going in after the season. And that's it. Now I'll have a separate video going sometime this week or next week about what I think the Cowboys should do in the offseason and make that like off-season free agency wish list type need and whatever, right? So hopping straight into it, man, the offseason, I'm going to just, do like a whole year-round view, of course. So I'm going to start off after that Niners loss that we took in the wild card weekend. In the game we were favored in to win, we ended up losing. So the offseason, we had entire, dysfunction within the organization. We were coming out saying, there were a lot of reports saying, is Sean Payton going to be the Dallas Cowboys head coach in the 2023-24 offseason? Which now we know that with the move made by the Broncos that isn't going to be happening, thank God. But that was definitely something that was a conversation that was being talked about a lot during the offseason. Then also what led into me also thinking that Coach McCarthy wasn't going to be our head coach coming into the season, which was the way that we handled the offseason. And our offseason came down for me in 3 moves. It was letting go of La'el Collins, which I'm glad that the Dallas Cowboys got rid of him. At first, I didn't really like the move. Hindsight is 2020, and you're like, okay, that was a really great move by the Joneses, and them foreseeing La'el Collins was no longer that player that he used to be, and that we got rid of him. He was solid in the Bengals, but he wasn't that player that we drafted him in 15, and how well he played that year, how well he played down the line until he had that injury in 2020. But getting rid of him was fine with me. I didn't get mad at that. Losing Randy Gregory because of the contract dispute and languages within the contract, I wasn't really mad of getting rid of Randy Gregory just because, the NFL finally had legalized weed, and that was a problem with him the entire time. It was nothing serious. He wasn't physically abusing anybody. He wasn't getting into altercations. He wasn't assaulting nobody. There was no gun in the seat. There's no one of those crazy NFL stories that you hear happen that a certain player does that he did. The only issues that he had was weed, and that was it. But then I was just figuring there would just be times years upon end where he would be suspended for 98% of the season, and he would come in and he would come in for 2 games, and then they would suspend him again before a playoff run, like what happened in 2016, and then again in 2017 he got suspended. Then also in 2020 he got suspended also for the first 6 or 7 games. So he was just a headache case. He was a really great player, but he just always was a headache and was just too much for the organization. So letting him go, that kind of hurt us, but it didn't hurt us as bad as his next move, and that was letting go of Amari Cooper. That Amari Cooper trade haunted us the entire season, and that was something that ultimately I knew that the Dallas Cowboys couldn't figure out that wide receiver 2 position, that we were going to get in trouble. And I knew, and that was the main cause for me as the reason why I thought the Dallas Cowboys were going to punt the season, and then they weren't going to try to add necessary talent because they were going to try to go get a Sean Payton and then give him the keys in terms of, selecting his players within the draft and whatever that case may be. So that's what I was thinking. I'm like, why let go of Amari Cooper? Michael Gallup tore ACL in that Arizona game, which is week 17 of the NFL season, which is very late in the season. So that's a December 28th injury. So you knew ACLs they take a year to recover. Now with modern medicine, that speeds it up to at least 9 to 10 months. So he came back way too early, in my opinion. But We gave him a big contract. We let go of Amari Cooper for nothing. The Jones let him go because of personal reasons, because a grown man said he didn't want to. That you guys can look up that story, but basically he didn't want to get certain shots, and the Jones felt some sort of way because a certain percent of the team was vaccinated and all that other stuff. So I'm not really going to get into the politics of that. But they let go of him because of dumb reasons, personal reasons, and they got rid of him, but never found any ways to replace him. We weren't going to go out and spend draft capital, which I know the Dallas Cowboys are not going to go out and spend draft capital. They weren't going to give up a first round pick to go get Tyreek Hill and first round plus like day 2 picks. They weren't going to do that. They weren't going to give up a first round pick to the Packers to go get Devontae Adams. They didn't make any moves like that in the offseason, which was really irritating because I knew that was going to be a problem come towards the season when it mattered that you was going to need a wide receiver too, because even if we all knew CeeDee Lamb was eventually going to be our number 1 wide receiver. We knew that. But for you just to get rid of Amari Cooper for nothing, which you saw that entire offseason, Marquise Brown, which is he's a wide receiver 2 at best in his career, got traded for a number 1. He got traded for a number 1. Ravens took care of that. Then you got Tyreek Hill got rid of for a number 1. Devontae Adams got rid of a number 1. So if I'm just looking at it like this, AJ Brown got rid of for number 1. So if you wanted to get rid of a solid receiver, you could have at best gotten a number 1. If you didn't get a number 1 for a second round, a third round pick from a certain team, but you just got rid of him for nothing, and then you spent the entire of all your signings, you betted on Noah Brown to be your second best receiver. You paid Michael Gallup solid money, but you did, thank God, found a way in his contract that you're able to get out of it in his second year if he doesn't show up, which this is going to be a proven year coming up in the fall of 23 for Gallup to become something. So with him, you giving him a big contract, but then you finding ways to replace Amari Cooper never came to fruition. Jalen Tolbert, that you drafted 88th overall in the 3rd round, didn't get any snaps. He was always a healthy scratch. He never was somebody who was able to crack the starting lineup, and you sucked at receiver. And week 1, Dennis Houston was your wide receiver 2, and Noah Brown was your slot receiver. Like, you can't go into the offseason. That's what I was saying in that Amari Cooper video, which you guys can tell the sound of my voice. I wasn't too happy about it because first off, the compensation that we got for Amari Cooper was poorest, and then you don't get anything else to replace him. And all the players that you collectively try to replace him with was James Washington, which didn't do anything. Then you elevated Dennis Houston to the active roster. Then you had to let him go to bring on certain players and things of that nature. And then another ignorant thing that the Dallas Cowboys were doing was you was betting on CeeDee Lamb to be healthy for you for the entire season, which is something you don't ever want to do. You don't ever plan for injury, but you always want to get depth at a necessary position like receiver, because if your number 1 goes down, imagine if you had Amari Cooper, and just take injury out of it. Imagine if you had Amari Cooper in that Niner game. That complexity of that game is completely different when you have a real wide receiver, because there's a lot of people who feel indifferent about Dak. Yes, Dak Prescott played a horrible game in that Niner game. I'm not even going to dismiss. I'm not going to cover up none of that. He played horrible. But you can't go into that game with the real number 1 defense of the San Francisco 49ers and think you're going to beat them with Noah Brown and T.Y. Hilton. You're not going to do that. Because once Tony Pollard went down, we all knew that was a wrap. So that was just horrible. This horrible roster management of the Dallas Cowboys is what costed them at the end of the season. So Now let's start attacking some of these games. So now we're going into after the off season, we drafted really well. We changed the complexity of this team, of our identity of being a sloppy football team, causing a lot of penalties, averaging at least 10 plus penalties a game. Then we also went from a team that was a finesse team, and we got to we got into a harder mentally physical team to this year. That's why we played a lot of close games. We never got blown out in any single game. All our games were close. There was never an ugly game. There were ugly performances by players, but we never had an ugly game where we got blown out. Like, we didn't have a Denver game like we had in 2021. We didn't have blowout losses like that, and which was really a key step, knowing that we were going to in my eyes, go far in the playoffs. But you start out week one against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that you end their season first round playoffs. You open up the season against them. That was a horrible game, and that's where you not having Amari Cooper really showed up, because that was a game where the Cowboys, they were trying to go empty. They were trying to go 5 wide. They were trying to air the ball out, because once the Bucs got up in that game, we weren't able to run the ball. I mean, we were able to run the ball, which was crazy because we were averaging 5 yards a carry with Zeke and with Tony Pollard, but we weren't able to run the ball as much as we wanted to, is because our offense was poor, because you had a makeshift offensive line because Tyron's off season. So now you went out there with a makeshift offensive line. They had a rookie starting at left tackle. Your second best receiver was Noah Brown. Dennis Houston was an undrafted free agent. Then you had CeeDee Lamb, who was great, but Kellen Moore wasn't calling the plays that he needed to. He didn't get Tony Pollard the ball in space like how we did later on that. Well, from week 2 all the way on, we finally utilized Tony Pollard. Thank God. That's what more than likely saved our season. Our defense knew that. We also knew going into the season that our defense was going to be the focal point, and that was going to be the face of this team. And they showed up and showed out throughout all these games, especially in the playoffs. So, week 1, you open it up, you automatically face adversity. You lose Dak Prescott with a broken thumb. He was out for like 6 to 8 weeks. Then you also lost Jalen Hurts with a sprained MCL that bothered him throughout the entire year. So he had to miss 4 weeks. Dak missed 6 weeks. So about 5.5 weeks he missed, because he missed that Bucs game. Then his first game back was against the Lions. So, like I said, you're automatically off rip of the season. You automatically faced with adversity. Already dealing with off-season adversity with your head coach in the headlines, potentially being replaced. Then you lose Amari Cooper, and you don't replace that with eloquent talent. So then now your lesser talent shows up week 1 against a veteran team, and you get the brakes beat off you. Then you go into week 2 with backup quarterback with Cooper Rush. And, after Dak Prescott went down, I was thinking the season was over, because I didn't know the severity of the Dak Prescott's injury with the thumb, especially with his throwing hand. I thought that was going to be bad for him. Thank God, God was on his side and everything like that, so he was able to come back shorter, closer than what we expected. But I also think that was that the Cowboys were pushing him to also start, because we knew that Cooper Rush was solid, but he wasn't good enough to be a starting quarterback for the rest of the year. So speaking about Cooper Rush did his thing, man. And then we go on a 4-game winning streak with Cooper Rush, most because of that defense playing amazing, only allowing 11 points a game. We only allowed Cincinnati Bengals. We held a healthy Bengals team that had Burrow, Higgins, Chase, Boyd, Mixon, Samaje Perine, that defense that they have. We only held them to 17 points. Defense played their butts off, man. And Dallas Cowboys, we played smart, clean football. We won that game. We go to week 3, Monday night. You play the New York Giants, who are 2-0 at this time. They're playing good football. They beat a great veteran team, perennial playoff team in the Tennessee Titans week 1. I forgot who they had beaten week 2, but I'm pretty sure it was also a solid opponent. I have to double check that real quick. But you went out there Monday night. You beat the Giants. An amazing performance by CeeDee Lamb. You go out the very next week. You take care of another division opponent within the Washington Commanders. Then you go out the very next week. You go play the Rams, and you shut the Rams down to only 10 points. And that was when they were healthy. They still had Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, Jalen Ramsey, Cooper Kupp, Matt Stafford, Allen Robinson. They still had Sean McVay. So they were still a team that was favored in that game, especially with a backup in Cooper Rush. And everyone was thinking that the Rams were going to turn around their season by starting off beating the Cowboys. We went out there as underdogs. We beat the Rams. Then we went the very next week, and we already knew that for us to win that game, that Cooper Rush had to play a clean game like he has been doing the past 4 weeks when he had been a starter. Then we go out there, the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl representative who had lost. I'm making this video the day of the Super Bowl, after the Super Bowl has ended. So, the Super Bowl representative, the Philadelphia Eagles, they lose to, they beat us 26-17. We knew that for us to win that game, Cooper Rush had to play clean football. He didn't. He turned the ball over 4 times and gave the ball to the Eagles in plus territory every single time, in which gave them a 20-0 lead on us. Then we took a hard L. Then Dak Prescott comes back, and he's practicing that week. Good week of practice. We go out. We stomp the Detroit Lions, who was averaging like 30 points a game up until when they played us, when we held them to 6. Again, another performance of your defense being the head of your team. Then you go out the very next week. You go play the Chicago Bears. You beat the Chicago Bears by 20. You drop 49. Then you have a bye week. Then you come out the bye week and you play a slow game against the Green Bay Packers, which I always say about the Dallas Cowboys, and the reason why I don't like when they have bye weeks or long periods of time of rest when they're not playing football is because they always come out sloppy, and that's what happened. But hey, we were up by 14 points in that game, and defense didn't do us a solid, man. And Green Bay came back and they beat us. But throughout that entire time, before we go into before we go into the next set of games, at this point, before going into that Vikings game, we were 6-3 going into that point. And going in 6-3, we're feeling real confident because 4 of those 6 wins were with your backup. Your 2 wins were when you did have your starting quarterback, but they were against lesser opponents, that people would say. Then, you even had a tremendous lead, and Dak Prescott played amazing in that Packer game. Defense didn't do you solid, and he lost. And so then you had adversity again. People were like, oh, is Dak Prescott really the guy? They're having this trouble against playing good quarterbacks and quote-unquote great teams. And even though the Packers, they weren't great at that point, because if we would have beaten them, then the very next week they had to play Philly and got blown out. Their season would have been ended, and it didn't matter with Week 18 for them. But anyway, a lot of adversity. Again, people down Dak Prescott, everything like that. Then off of, 4 or 5 days rest, you have to turn around and go play the, a week later you had to go play the Minnesota Vikings, man. And the Minnesota Vikings at this point, they were 6-1 at this point. They just had the week prior beaten the Buffalo Bills, who were a talented team. They were favored to go play in the Super Bowl in Arizona. And, things didn't end up the way they wanted to, but they had faced adversity themselves. But the Vikings had played a really good game against them, had beaten them. Justin Jefferson had catch of the year, play of the year. And, everyone was doubting us. Everyone was thinking that we won't get blown out by the Minnesota Vikings. Turned out that we blow them out 40-3. We look amazing. We beat a team that made the playoffs and everything like that. So, we beat them. Then 4 days later, we have to go play a division rival who has been playing clean football, amazing football up to that point. Then we go there, we beat them in the New York Giants on Thanksgiving. Then 10 days later, we go play the Indianapolis Colts, blowing them out 54-19. Then we go out, a week later, we beat the Houston Texans, and in the last second, game-winning drive to go get that win. So after that point, after losing to the Packers, we were on a 4-game winning streak, putting us at 10-3. And at this point, before going into the next set of games, the next 4 set of games, I was really high, really confident on my team, thinking that, okay, 10 wins, we're really good right now. We're definitely locked to go into the playoffs. I was really excited for what we were doing, especially with the adversity that we were going through, which was something that I really loved about this team that I wasn't able to say about a whole lot of other Cowboy teams. Was that even though with all the adversity we had gone through in games through the season, that we still had bounced back, and we always put our best foot forward, and we always gave teams a fit no matter what our situation was, no matter who wasn't there, who was there, and if they were there, they were hobbled, things of that nature. So I was really proud of what the Dallas Cowboys were able to do overall in the season, but especially at this point when I'm talking about before we go into Jacksonville. Jacksonville again, you lost 40-34 in overtime because of a Dak Prescott threw the ball right in the numbers of Noah Brown, popped up in the air. Rayshon Jenkins took it back for 6. That's how the game had ended. But you should have been in that game because, again, you were up 17, 20 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They come back, they beat you, because that's when, which we knew was going to be hard, because December 4th, when we played the Indianapolis Colts and we had blown them out, Anthony Brown had tore his Achilles, and we knew that we had already at that point, again, adversity, the reoccurring theme of adversity that we faced throughout the season. You lost your quarterback for 6 to 8 weeks. You lost your pivotal safety on your defense for 4 to 6 weeks. Then you had lost your Jordan Lewis, again, you lost him in that Lions game. Then you lost your cornerback two, you know, more than halfway into the season. And then now you're going in with question marks at cornerback two. Then we had to get that filled in by Deron Bland, who stepped up really well for us in that season. So that's almost ultimately costed you in that Jacksonville game because Jacksonville was able to air you out. Then 5 days later, you go out and you go play the Philadelphia Eagles on a short week, who are hot at this time. Obviously, they plugged in Gardner Minshew because Jalen Hurts had suffered a shoulder injury against the Chicago Bears. And then Dak Prescott went out there against the number one ranked defense at this point, especially in the secondary. They were ranked number one. He goes out there and he lights them on fire. He puts up 40 points. Mainly him and CeeDee Lamb put up 40 points by themselves. A great catch by T.Y. Hilton on 3rd and 30, which led us to go get that CeeDee Lamb second touchdown of the game, which put us up 40 to I forgot what the score was at that time, 40 to 30, I want to say, something of that magnitude, or 40 to 28. And then, Philadelphia, they go down there, they go score because they haven't had a problem scoring throughout that entire year as well. And so we go out there, we have a statement win where we score 40 on the opposing team. And then that was another thing, that was adversity that we faced a lot in the season with Dak Prescott turning the ball over. And then you just look at a lot of his interceptions, they were just because of miscommunications, bounced off of players' helmets and shoulder pads and everything like that. So we had a lot of adversity with that. Then you beat the Titans again on another short week by 14 points. Then you went out and you put out a stinker against the Commanders. And when I went back and looked back on film, and not even that, just when I saw the TV copy after giving my analysis of that game, I knew that they were running vanilla plays because they were getting ready, because they already had locked in the 5 seed at that point, and they knew that they were going to play the winner of the NFC South, which we knew at that point was going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Tampa Bay Buccaneers wild card weekend on Monday night, which was horrible for us because I didn't want the Dallas Cowboys playing Monday night. I know why they did it. Marketing reasons. Troy Aikman's going to announce another playoff game. He's always announced all your playoff games in the past outside of that Niners game. So he's been mostly, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman have been announcing your games. So I get it for marketing reasons, but we went out there, we completely beat the brakes off of Tampa Bay, and Dak Prescott with those same weapons of one-legged Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, who was your best receiver all year and top 10 around the league. Then Tony Pollard being your second best offensive weapon. T.Y. Hilton, you having to rely on a 34-year-old receiver to come and be your savior. And, you go out there and you beat the brakes off of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had been playing sloppy football the entire year. So it was a really great win. Dak Prescott had 5 touchdowns, and then he was up there with the top 5 quarterbacks who have only did that with 5 touchdowns within the game, 5+ touchdowns in a game. So he has that towards his NFL career, his NFL resume. Then you go out 6 days later, and you have to play a tough San Francisco football team. You knew that was going to be arguably the best defense that you've seen all year outside of Tampa week 1 and the Philadelphia Eagles that you've seen twice. So those were easily some of the top defenses that you have played, and you really knew that was going to be a tough game. I had them winning, of course, because they're my team, but I also felt like, okay, we've been waiting 300 and whatever days, I had said 373 days to play the Niners. You go out there, Dak Prescott plays a horrible game. No excuses, but horrible game. And what had happened in that game, other than Dak Prescott playing horribly, was that once Tony Pollard had went down, the air just completely fell out of the Cowboys offensively, where we weren't able to move the ball frequently out at all. I was super mad in that game because we didn't give Malik Davis any sort of touches because he was a more dynamic back than Ezekiel Elliott. Then we had to rely on Noah Brown to create separation. He wasn't. Michael Gallup was okay in that game. He created some separation, but not a whole lot. Dak Prescott was just getting flustered all game. And, that's what ultimately ended our season, man. And what I ultimately thought around this season, and for me, because of high expectations I give. It's either NFC Championship or the Super Bowl for me, in my opinion. I'm not going around here saying, okay, we're going to go to the Super Bowl every year, but I just figured, like, hey, all the adversity we had faced all year, I was like, it's our time to beat the Niners, because just based off what happened last year, all the adversity we had went through this year, I was thinking we was gonna at least beat the Niners and at least be in the championship game, playing the Eagles, giving them a run for their money. But, it didn't happen. And honestly, if you just put all the high expectations aside and you just look at what the season had brought you through all the adversity of injuries, that if you just look at just the Garrett administration, if we had Garrett, bro, this season is like a 6-7 win team. We're already, I probably would have been making off-season mock draft videos for you guys around November, December if we had the Garrett administration, because we wouldn't even be in play for the 7th seed at all in the NFC if we was under the Garrett administration. That just shows you what coaching does. And just all that, all that, like I said, adversity you had to win through. Dak Prescott missing 6 to 8 weeks. You losing both your starting corners that are legitimate starters in this league. You losing your Pro Bowl Hall of Famer left tackle for almost the entire year. Then they also lose your Pro Bowl right tackle the week after. You lose your your starting cornerback in back-to-back weeks. So it was just, and then you also, to end the season, you lose your second best dynamic running back, and then just only lose by 7 to the Niners is pretty remarkable if you just put away all the high expectations I have. If you just look at a football team who just gone through what they have gone through, you take off that star, this team would have gotten so much love and praise. But since you're wearing the star, you're wearing the Cowboys, and you're either loved or you're hated, and more times than not, you are going to be hated within your own fan base as well. So I just think the Dallas Cowboys had a solid season, knowing that ever since that last Niner game, your head coach's job security was in doubt. Your front office basically give you a crappy offense to go out throughout the entire year, and your quarterback was able to still average 28 points a game. And then you also, you get a playoff win with those same crappy weapons that the front office has given you, and then you end the season off only losing by 7 to a team who was favored to win. So, realistically, if I'm looking at it from a realistic standpoint, Dallas Cowboys, they had a solid season, man. There's nothing that you can really get too upset about. You just didn't want to go out the way you did, but hey, it is what it is, man. And now in the offseason, I'm going to have that video going up pretty soon, but there are just a few moves that Dallas Cowboys need to make. If they just shore up some ends on that offensive side of the football, and they add more pieces to that defense that's already great, I would definitely have us next year, definitely with barring no major health injuries, we will be fine. And, I can see it's definitely going far next year. Like I said, all that contingent on is this front office. If this front office doesn't make any big plays in terms of getting better with this roster, and, if they don't do that, then this front office is showing you that they don't want to win. So if they have another offseason again where they just sign their own and just draft, and they don't help at all in this offense to add more playmakers, like you saw in that Super Bowl, they had playmakers. Eagles had playmakers on playmakers on playmakers. Chiefs had playmakers on playmakers, plus a great scheme. Both teams had great schemes, which is what got them there to that game anyway. So it's going to be coaching, front office, and the players the players that are drafted that have already been there, and new acquisitions. So it's up to them to, dictate on how far we want to go in an NFL season. So that's it. I hope you guys have a nice day. If you made it this far, you guys are real MVPs. I appreciate if you guys would like, subscribe if you're new, comment, and share my video with anyone who you think might enjoy my content. See you guys in the next video. Bye.